My name is Elaine Sponholtz. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Florida. I'm here to interview. Let me start again. My name is Elaine Sponholtz. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Florida in the Journalism College, and I'm here to interview Rabbi Allen Secher, who has returned to St. Augustine 50 years after being a civil rights activist here. And so, Rabbi, would you state your name and where you're from for our records?
My name is Allen Secher. I live in Whitefish, Montana, up in cold but magnificent country. Yeah.
Well, it's a humid day here in Florida, so that sounds wonderful. So 50 years ago, you were part of the civil rights movement, and we wondered what your view and experience of the South was at that time. Had you been to Florida or the South to experience it before?
Elaine, have I been to the South before? This was my second jailing. I had been jailed 2 years earlier in Albany, Georgia, on a civil rights demonstration. In many cases, similar to what we experienced here. There were, at that time, there were about 30 clergy. Here in St. Augustine, it was just rabbis. But in Albany, Georgia, it was about 30, at least 30 clergy, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, white, black. So I knew what to expect when I volunteered to come here. That was already embedded in my psyche.
How did your childhood and upbringing shape your views on race?
Oh, boy, am I glad you asked me that. Okay. I grew up in a mill town in western Pennsylvania in the 40s. And anti-Semitism hung in the rafters. It was the elixir everyone drank in those days. And as a child, my head was busted open frequently with rocks with Jew bastard on the other side of the rocks. I'm 12 years old. I'm in a nearby town. I'm having an appendicitis attack. My mother races me to the nearest hospital. It was a Catholic hospital. We were told there were no doctors at the hospital, that I'd have to go down the road to the public hospital. And it was clear to both my mother and me what was happening there. But the biggest, I think most damaging was, Elaine, I was a good golfer as a kid. Awful now, but as a kid I was really a good golfer. And my athletic role in high school, after all, it's the athletes who were the kings. And I was the only Jew in my high school class. But my athletic role was to be a stalwart member of the high school golf team. I would have been number 2 or 3 on the high school golf team. But I was told that I could not play because the country club was restricted, no Jews allowed. That's not the case nowadays, but this was 60 years ago. And that was a destroyer. So that those kind of memories set my own attitude towards civil rights. So that my feeling from that time on was, I knew what it was like. No, I was not black. I could not be in black shoes. I could be in my shoes. But I knew what it was like, and I knew that I would do whatever I could to prevent it. So that was buried deep. I think that's the long answer to your question.
Thank you. Can you describe your relationship to other civil rights leaders?
Well, in this St. Augustine experience, there are two of us who were jailed back in Albany. Rabbi Cy Dresner, who really was the leader of the pack. Cy Dresner, and you'll get a chance to interview him, I'm sure. But Cy Dresner was King's rabbi. And Dresner and I were in school together. He was a year or so ahead of me. But, and I would say he's the major Jewish civil rights leader. Others were Johnny come lately or Johnny come mouth, okay? And I did have, after Albany, I did have the thrill of, there was a fellow out in Long Island. I was rabbi in Long Island in the Albany, Georgia days. And there was a fellow, a layman in Long Island, who hosted a dinner for the 4 Long Island clergy who had been arrested. There were 2 rabbis and 2 ministers, and he hosted a dinner with King. So it was 7 of us, and that was, that's a remarkable evening. Now, if you ask me, what do we talk about? I really don't remember, because my jaw was probably at my knees this whole time, and just, So that, and then from the St. Augustine experience, there were 2, maybe 3 guys that were civil rights leaders that were part of St. Augustine. Cy Dresner, the layman who was the 16th member of our group, Al Vorsman, that was his field with, it was then United American Hebrew College, UAHC. Al Vorsman, that was his field. And then Balfour Brickner, who was also a part of civil rights. Now, it was my being. It's as simple as that. It's what motivated me in the rabbinate. Probably is what kept me in the rabbinate. Because after St. Augustine, I still didn't stop. It was not a one-time only, or in this case, a 2-time only.
As a follow-up question, you referred to Rabbi Secher, Rabbi Dresner, as King's rabbi. You mean Martin Luther King, and
yes.
Could you describe that?
It was a telegram. The start of this whole situation was a telegram that King sent to Cy Dresner at the Rabbinic Convention in Atlantic City, New Jersey, asking rabbis to come to St. Augustine. But it was sent to Dresner. I would say, if one were to have stopped King at any time during this time and have said to, who's your rabbi, baby? King would have said, Cy Dresner. I would say, secondarily, it would have been Abraham Joshua Heschel, who is in the Selma, I think it was Selma, with Heschel holding arms with King. But I would say that would be secondarily. The rest are for PR purposes.
Well, one thing I notice about the historical way that events are remembered is that often women and children are left out of the description. I wondered, what part did women and children play in the protests that you took part in?
Well, to start with, the march, what became the famous, for us, the famous march from the church to the black neighborhood, through the white neighborhood, the slave market, and back. I'll tell you this a little later, but in that march, and I would guess there were about 100 of us, Elaine, but I was front of the line, and I was paired with a black woman, with a young black woman, I'd say mid-20s or so. And I would say probably half the people on that march were black and white women. Half the people that were arrested with us were black and white women. Children, well, the famous spot from here is Brock and the acid, the muriatic acid. Well, if you look, those are young kids that are in. Those aren't adults like us. Those are young kids. The famous is a black girl. The real picture in fear. Now, at the rabbis' convention, this was pre-women rabbis. But I imagine that had there been women rabbis, they would have joined us. Some. Not all, but some.
And just for people that might be listening to this without going back into the archives, you're talking about the muriatic acid that was poured in a pool when the pool was being integrated by activists.
Right. It's Brock pouring muriatic acid into the pool and the kids not budging. And I refer to that as the most courageous act I've ever seen.
And Brock was the
Brock was the manager of Munson's Motor Lodge.
Okay.
And that was the picture shot around the world, was that photo. When anybody thinks of St.Augustine, 1964, it's that picture. It's not us. I'd say there are very few. We did what we did, and that was magnificent. But it's that picture of Brock and the acid that's the memorabilia of this moment.
And so, could you remind us of the timeline? Was that incident at the hotel, did that happen after you all were arrested here?
No. No. The timeline was, we arrived here on the 17th of June. We flew in from Philadelphia. Now, you have to forgive me, sort of, because that's 50 years ago, and I keep on saying, I don't remember what I had for breakfast, so trying to remember clearly. But we flew here, and that evening we were directed by King and spoken to at the church by King, Abernathy, and Andy Young. And then we went on a march, and the march had been in process at least for a week. King had been arrested a week before, but the march, and during the course of instruction, King did manage to tell us that there had been a shooting prior to the march, or during the march on one of the days. I don't remember which day, and perhaps my fellow buddies will, but there had been a shooting. So they lined us up outside the church in twos, and I was at the very front of the line. I was number one, paired with this black girl, marching through an area where there had been a shooting. There had been no damage, and the National Guard had been called out, and they were along the route. But I had to figure that probably 2/3 of the guards were segregationists themselves, and what the hell's going to happen from them too? The shooting had been somebody had crawled up a tree, and so when we walked under the trees, it's in the white neighborhood, we walked under the trees. You can imagine my fear as we walked. Now, Elaine, obviously I made it, but you can imagine my fear as we marched. The eye was on the prize, so that the young lady whose hand I was holding through all this, and I had no conversation, because we didn't want to look like this was a lark. We want to look like we were serious. So the eye on the prize was, keep your eye forward and sing songs. Now, we were jeered along the way in the white neighborhood. We were jeered and we paid no attention. Let's put it this way. We, what's the word I'm looking for? We played as if we paid no attention, but it was still there. We marched to the slave market, did a prayer service there, then sang songs, and then turned around and walked back. And that night we stayed in black homes. The black community, and in those days, it wasn't the black, in those days it was the Negro community, were so welcoming. I remember how comfortable we felt. Welcomed into their homes, fed by them, slept in their homes. Same thing held true in the church. It was, hey bro. Nowadays that would be hey bro and high fives. It was a warm feeling. So that was the evening. You asked for timeline. The next was the next morning, where, as I remember it, we were divided into 3 groups. One group was to go to the Woolworths, that's where the St.Augustine 4 started. One group was to go to the Woolworths lunch counter. One group was to go to the Munson restaurant. And the other group, the largest of the group, was to be in the parking lot. And that's where I was, in the parking lot. I don't remember how many of us. I have the feeling the great majority of the rabbis were in that parking lot. But the great joy of these few days here is we're going to find out sort of what the story was. But as I recall it, we did a prayer service, we sang songs, we joined arms. It was white and black. But if there were ministers, it was black ministers. There were not, to my recollection, there were not any white clergy at this particular moment. During that time, a group of kids, I remembered it as breaking away from us, but it seems that that's a hazy memory. I think the kids came on their own, or it was planned. It wasn't that this was spontaneous. This was planned. But they came, it was 7 of them. I thought, most of the time, I thought it was all blacks. It was not. There were 2 whites. But they came, leaped into the pool, and immediately exited from the pool were the whites that were around the pool, that were hanging out in the pool. And that's when Brock ran and got his muriatic acid and poured it. The kids were told they were under arrest for, goodness knows, breaking the peace, I don't know what, but they wouldn't leave. Even with the muriatic acid, till finally the second picture from that period of time was a cop leaping in with his clothes on to get him out of the pool. We were then arrested. And of my memories was the cop who arrested us putting 5 of us into his squad car. And when we got to the jail, there was a police photographer awaiting us because he wanted his picture taken with the 5 of us. I guess for his scrapbook and to show his buddies around the bar, ho, 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 look what I got me.
You're talking about the sheriff wanted his picture?
Whoever was the cop was that arrested us. I did see a scene that I've talked about frequently. We were in the parking lot of the jail with all the others who had been arrested, and no more than about 50 feet or so away from me, there was a young white girl. And as I recall, with a skirt. Now she could have had jeans on, but I recall it with a skirt. Young white girl, mid-20s. One of the cops took a cattle prod and shoved it up her ass and turned it on. And I can just see the scream. I can hear the screaming as if it were 10 minutes ago when you started the questions. The scream from this girl. And of course, look what I did. So we were then arrested, and I guess one of us made the request that we be segregated, the rabbis, because we were in a cell by ourselves. We were in, I think it was 2 cells by ourselves. And out of that came the why we went piece. Now I'm going to guess that was generated by Rabbi Eugene Borowitz, the philosopher among us. But I'm going to guess that that's where that was generated, and that much of the language was probably from him, but all has contributed where our heads were at, what we were thinking. There is an apocryphal story, and I guess we're going to find this out with these interviews. There was an apocryphal story that it was written on the back of a Ku Klux Klan poster. Gee, I hope that's right. That makes for a much better story. Okay? But I really don't remember. I do remember that this jail was far cleaner than the Albany, Georgia jail. The toilets worked, which they didn't in Georgia. I do remember that we sat and told stories. We had a shower where we could take a shower, but they gave us no towels. They gave us paper towels. Ever try it? Dry yourself with a paper towel after a shower, and they gave us each one. But now there is a divergence in memory. I recall staying there 3 days. But it seems that some of the other guys recall only 1. I really don't. I'll remember clearly after these few days, but I recall 3 days. There's a side bit here for this story. When we were booked, I was rabbi at the time in Mexico City with a gringo congregation, but Mexico City. But when we were booked and they asked for address, I did not want to say Mexico City because then they could say, they're bringing in outside agitators. Look at that. Okay, so I listed my residence as Butler, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. Okay, so the arrest record lists Butler. I was in Mexico. My congregation did not know. And my wife did not know. There was, when the telegram was read, there was no doubt in my mind, I'm going. If I hesitated, it might have been for 8 seconds. And okay, long answer. Next.
No, that's fine. How did your faith relate to your activism? I mean, a lot of that is in the letter, but we'd like to hear it.
My faith was you got to do what's right. And what's right was to be there. It was simple as that. I mean, if I'm a dedicated, believing Jew, not just rabbi. Rabbi's the mouth. It's the mouth. Okay? But if I'm Allen, the gut-wrenching Jew, then there should be no doubt about doing what was right. Not talking about what was right, doing what was right. Okay? The favorite thing among Christian groups for a while was WWJD. Well, that J can stand for Jew too. What would Jews do? And we read something at today's service that was so perfect, from Gene Lippman, that was so perfect, saying, yeah, this is what you do. If you're Jewish, this is what you do. Don't give me lip service, do it.
Walk the walk. Huh?
Walk the walk.
What was the reaction to your involvement in protesting from your Jewish community back home?
Well, in Mexico, and I don't remember if I said anything in the Mexican Jewish community. If I had said, what I had done. Because there the reaction would be different. First of all, it's mostly gringos, not exclusively. And in Mexico would say to you, you want to protest? Go ahead. We're a democratic country. You can protest. Just know we're going to shoot you. Okay? I didn't want to get shot, Elaine. Okay? I wanted to be here 50 years later. So if I got shot, I couldn't have made it. So I didn't want to get shot. Now, I do want to, if I may, I do want to tell you a story that's germane to St. Augustine, but didn't happen about St. Augustine.
We have time.
But if we're doing civil rights, we're going to make the time, because I'm going to tell the story.
Okay.
Okay. It's my first congregation, Massapequa, Long Island. I was a hero after being arrested in Albany. Whoa, look at our rabbi, New York Times, Long Island newspaper, Time magazine, all the television. Whoa, so that my very first service, I hadn't done a first service there yet. My first service was jammed, standing room only, our hero.
You were a celebrity.
I was a celebrity. And look what our rabbi did down in Albany, Georgia. Fast forward about a month later. I'm sitting on a Saturday night with the youth group. And I get a phone call from a Long Island Fair Housing Council. There had been obvious discrimination in the sales of homes in the next town, in a development, that a black family had been refused a home. And the Long Island Fair Housing Council was going to picket the next day. They were taking out an injunction against sales, because that was illegal in New York. Taking out an injunction. But the injunction couldn't be served till Monday. But if the remaining 3 homes or so were sold on Sunday, then the developers could say, no, we didn't discriminate. So if we mount a picket, then people might not come and buy homes. And I said, sure, of course I'll be there. So they said, well, is there anybody you could bring? I said, well, I got 14 kids sitting in my living room, 14 teenagers, and there's nothing more liberal than a teenager. So I said, I'll ask them. So I went to the kids, and I said, told them the situation, and said, how many of you would like to join me? And of course, every hand went up. And I said, that's all fine and good, but you go home and ask your folks. If your folks say yes, you'll meet me at the temple tomorrow, and we'll carpool. 6 phone calls in the morning from kids saying, we talked it with our folks, and our folks said, by all means. And then a 7th from the president of the congregation. And this is almost verbatim, the conversation. Because there are indelible things in life that no matter when they took place, you still remember them. And not only that, I still remember his name 60 years or 55 years later. He said, I understand that you're going on a demonstration today. I said, yeah. He said, and I understand that you're taking some kids from the congregation. I said, yeah. He said, you can't do that. I said, What do you mean I can't do that? He said, that's not your job. Oh? I said, so what's my job? He said, your job is to teach them. I said, oh? I said, to teach them what? He said, to teach them Judaism. I said, oh? He said, no, that's not what I mean. I said, okay, Herb, what do you mean? He said, your job is to teach them the difference between right and wrong. By now I get the drift. And I said, tell you what, Herb, I'm going on that demonstration. I will go as Allen Secher, not as Rabbi of Temple Shalom, but as Allen Secher. And I will call the 6 kids and tell them they have to go on their own. 4 of those 6 kids did show. Following Friday. Now, the tradition in those days, and I don't know what it is nowadays, but the tradition in those days was the president of the congregation sat up in the pulpit. So, sermon time, I told the story. And I made it clear how furious I was, and I said, look, I've only been here a little over a month, and you as a congregation have to decide, why did you hire me? Did you hire me because I played college soccer and semi-pro soccer? Did you hire me because I can do all the latest dances? I said, or did you hire me to be an inspiration to you and the kids? Did you hire me so I could teach the difference between right and wrong? If you hired me for the former, you got the wrong guy. If you hired me for the latter, yes, you got the right guy, but you have to make up your mind. I didn't last very long in that congregation.
How old were you then?
I was, let's see, this is 62. I was 27. Okay. So I didn't last. It was a bad fit. I mean, it was really a bad fit. And shortly thereafter, I went to the placement commission and said, get me as far away as you can. As far as they could send me was Mexico City. But that's an example in the sense of the congregation. And we read something this morning. And when Dick Levy does his bit here, have him read the thing from Eugene Lippman into the record that he had this morning, because it's the perfect statement, I think, that all of us feel about congregations. My absolute feeling is not just the talk, it's nice, but are you with me? Are you willing to put yourself on the line for things that are right? Then I've succeeded.
So that brings to mind a question that I had here about how you faced your fear, how you came to that decision, and you're saying that it took 8 seconds and that was it.
Well, you have to bear in mind at that stage I already had the 2-year earlier experience, so that I knew what to expect. And in many respects, the Albany, Georgia experience was really awful. And so I knew what to expect. But I still felt I got to do it. That was not the case with the other 485 of my fellow rabbis.
How do you view the progress that has been made in ending discrimination?
The Roadrunner. Beep, 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 and then runs back. Beep, 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 and runs back. Our Supreme Court did us a terrible disservice. I mean, they set back what we dreamt of 50 years ago.
Are you talking about voting rights?
Yeah. Okay. in so many states now with regulations as to voting, sending it back. King is turning over in his grave. I mean, yes, it's true we have a black president, but it's hidden now. It's hidden under all kinds of blankets, but it's the same bullshit. And so that, have we made progress? Yes. Have we made enough? Not in your life.
So now it's 50 years to the day of that day that you cited earlier. It's June 17th, 2014, and I was just downtown yesterday and saw that the slave market is still not marked as such.
So I understand. I understand that the story is that it was a marketplace, and sort of in one corner of the market, that's bullshit. And you may quote me.
Do you see yourself as a hero?
No. Oh my God, no, Elaine. I see myself as doing right. I'm a coward. I'm a coward. You ought to see me when I try skiing where I live. Put me at the top of the hill. Holy shit, I gotta go down there. No, I'm a coward. No, I've never thought of myself as a hero. Not at all. Okay? I mean, if you want to call me a hero, tell my wife. Tell my wife. No, not a hero.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Boy, I think I've covered a lot. I mean, I'm glad you gave me the chance to talk. I love talking. I can't write, but I love talking. So, no, I think we've covered almost everything.
How do you think we should move forward from here as far as activism or making a change?
Well, I think the more we do moments like this, I think the more we take our testimonies here and turn it into a documentary, the more we print, is that if our actions can turn around one person, the old midrash is, if you save the life of one person, it's like you've saved the whole world. Okay? If you turn around one person, then we've saved part of the world. So if somebody reads about this or sees about this and says, geez, look at what these guys did, and said, I ought to be on that boat, then it's a start. It's a succeeding. And I'll be happy with that.
I didn't get a chance to ask you what your part was in drafting that letter that you all worked on in the jail.
I don't remember. I think each of us contributed something, but I sincerely don't remember. The letter is very fancy. It's strong language. I'm not a strong languager, but I imagine here and there I had something to say, because I always have something to say. So but I don't remember. I would say, of the six of us that are here, Dresner might remember, and Dick Levy would probably remember. He's a wordsmith. So Dick Levy might remember. I just don't.
So as a final question, how did that experience change you?
It didn't. It didn't change me. I was there beforehand, I was there afterwards. I'm still very much a part. My wife and I founded two groups in our town. One is a multi-faith ministerial association. I am not permitted to join the local ministerial association because that calls for ministers of the gospel, and you must affirm that you are a gospel lover. So I'm not welcomed, but we formed, there are 14 ministers in this multi-faith group, including Baha'i, Catholic, Mennonite. So that was one group, and then we are blessed with neo-Nazis in our neighborhood, and so we formed a group called Love Lives Here as a response to the neo-Nazis, and that group is still very, very active, and that's still part of our civil rights. Now, it's interesting in our area. I'm pretty well known in the community, and that's a good thing. And the PS to that is there is a statewide magazine called 406 Woman, and that magazine elected me this past year their Man of the Year. Now, for a rabbi in Christian Montana, that's a biggie. In Christian Montana, where most people don't even know what a rabbi is, let alone a Jew. Okay? So it's a different kind of civil rights. So I'm still active. And I think as they're pouring me into the grave, I'm still going to be at it. I don't want to stop. You don't stop because you're an old fart. You keep going. It's 50 years later, I'm still on that treadmill. Okay?
Well, thank you so much.
One question, if you don't mind, Elaine, if you would still be my eye line.
Okay.
If you don't mind, just one question.
I don't mind.
You're obviously familiar with many of the local stories as far as the four girls at the Woolworths. And did you have any interaction with some of that driving force for civil rights in St. Augustine, names like Dr. Haling? And did you have any interaction or any impressions from your experience, at least in or around?
We did have interaction.
And if you would still address her.
Oh, right. Okay. Did we have interaction with the ongoing civil rights that were happening here? We did, but I don't remember it. I mean, it automatically would have happened. It just would have happened because we would have wanted to have heard their stories. But I don't remember it. And I think that's, to add to your list, I think that's a perfect question to ask the others, because their memory might be clearer. The oldest of us will be Cy Dresner, that are here, of the six of us that are here. The oldest. The youngest will be Jerry Goldstein and Dick Levy.
That's it. I just wondered. Thank you very much.
Well,
We did it.
it was a great pleasure and honor to speak with you.
Thank you.
And we thank you on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. And we want to say that we hope that future generations will be able to access your wisdom and appreciate what you did.
Thank you. I'll be anxious to see the transcript just to see what the hell did I say.
You did great.